And, once again, for those of you who are new, you're getting a picture that Immunotech is not a normal company. Immunical is not a normal product, and we're just starting, most importantly. So, Dr. Gutman, my good friend, back to you. I know you have got two amazing people that you're going to be interviewing here, so I'm going to turn the reins of the call over to you, and I'm going to sit and enjoy it and take notes and do a little housekeeping on the chat line.
Yeah, and amazing is an understatement. I have someone coming on now. I love this woman. I think anybody who meets her is always so enthralled and so taken by her. Of course, I'm talking about Dr. Patricia Kongshavn. Dr. Kongshavn, it's such an honor. It's such an honor to have you on the call today.
Oh, do I start speaking?
Yes. Patricia, maybe we could start out. I'm going to ask you a question, and John was talking about history. Clearly, you were the foremost female pioneer in the immune system. Just tell us a little bit of where the immune system was at in the 1970s.
1970s. Let me see. This was when I decided to take a PhD at McGill University. I went to the Department of Physiology because I was a physiologist at the time. And I was lucky enough to meet a professor there who was doing transplantation and trying to investigate why the body would reject a transplant from an unrelated individual. And at this time, all we really knew about transplant rejection was that there were lymphocytes and macrophages involved. So that was sort of the picture in, that would be the 1960s, yes. So anyway, well, actually, I could go back even further and tell you that when I was at Cambridge University in the 1950s, I distinctly remember a picture of a lymphocyte being put up on a screen and being told, well, this is one of the white blood cells, but we don't know what it does.
Wow.
Yes. And I have that picture in my mind. Anyway, go back to the 60s. I was studying transplantation, and shall I tell you a little bit about what I was doing? I was taking skin from one mouse and grafting it onto the back of a mouse of a different strain, and seeing how long it took for the skin graft to be rejected when the mice were also being given an immunosuppressant. And I was lucky enough to make a finding, which was that female mice rejected their skin grafts more rapidly than males, and it was a significant difference. So when I told my professor that, he said, oh, your first publication. And in fact, I did publish this work in Nature, which is probably the most prestigious journal I've ever published in.
That's a huge, huge journal.
So this was again in the 60s. So then all we really knew about was, as I said, lymphocytes and macrophages were doing something. And I think we knew at that point that the lymphocytes made antibody. Then later in the late 60s, early 70s, all of a sudden, a lot of really interesting facts started to come out. We learned that there were differences between the lymphocytes. There were things called B lymphocytes that made antibody, B because they came from the bone marrow, or T lymphocytes that did something else. And we weren't sure what in the beginning, but then it was sort of discovered that that the T cells had various different functions. There was the T cell that killed foreign or unwanted cells like tumor cells or viral infected cells or skin grafts. And then there were T helper cells that helped the B cells to make antibody. And there were T regulatory cells, which were supposed to which did in fact damp down the immune response, because of course the immune response gets out of hand. This is very damaging. And in fact, that's what we see today, incidentally, in these very sick COVID-19 patients.
The reason behind cytokine storm.
They talk about a cytokine storm, yes, cytokine storm. And this is because the T cells, they make all these small molecules to do their job. And these have been given the name cytokines, and there's lots of them. And they simply get out of hand. Presumably the regulatory T cells are not doing their job. And it's very interesting, actually, that recently we hear that dexamethasone is able to help these patients and I think cut down their sick time by several days. Because, of course, dexamethasone is a corticosteroid, and corticosteroids are well known to suppress the immune response. So,
with this knowledge, you brought this knowledge to McGill University.
Which knowledge?
Your background that you did on the skin grafting.
Yes.
And so you were perhaps one of the first PhDs in immunology in Canada.
Yes, I think I probably was, yes. Yes. And we were still under the auspices of the Department of Physiology. But of course, physiology is in fact just, immunology is just the physiology of the lymphoid organ.
You're far too modest, Patricia. So we're talking to the first PhD in immunology in Canada at McGill University, which is the Harvard of Canada. Now, Patricia, how was it that you got involved in the project that we're all interested in here, the study of Immunical and your association with Dr. Bunos?
Well, it was really fortuitous, I suppose. I was just, this is now the 70s, I was an assistant professor in the Department of Experimental Medicine, working up in that building that you showed earlier, the Montreal General Hospital Research Institute. And I had a technician and a graduate students and a postdoctoral fellow, and I was doing various different immunological experiments. And one day I was told, oh, there's somebody coming who wants to come and do a sabbatical year with you. His name is Dr. Gustavo Bunos, and he's very charming, and he breaks into operatic songs from time to time. And I think that was about all they told me about him. So he came with his technician, and he had the idea, as you sort of explained, that diet was important for the immune system. And so he wanted to learn some immunology and see if he could test out this idea.
So I'm going to vulgarize this a little bit. You essentially taught Dr. Gustavo Bunos immunology.
Yes, I did. And he taught me a lot about nutrition.
The opera.
Yes, and the opera. He was a charismatic, wasn't he? Yes. So we would sit down together and devise these experiments. First of all, with amino acids, we wanted to see if different ratios of amino acids would enhance the immune response. And in fact, we got a paper published in that, but it wasn't terribly exciting. And then, as you said, one day, this little parcel arrived on his desk, and we had this very nice sensitive assay for measuring immune responses. So we said, well, why not? Let's try this protein in our diet, and that's what we did. And of course, the results followed.
So these major discoveries at the time, due to the course of immunology and medicine in the future?
Well, I think what we would talked about is what it would do for people, really. Because one of the things about Gustavo was that, you know, his research was focused on helping people. And so we would say, well, let me see. One of the things he always talked about was that perhaps people wouldn't find our research very glamorous, you know, compared to finding all these different C cells of T cell subsets, but that it was something that, you know, would actually be capable of improving the health of everyday people. So we would hope that, you know, we were going to do something that would actually improve the health of just normal people and patients.
Clearly, that's mission accomplished.
Yes, I think so.
Yes. Do you have any ideas about where this may continue to go to in the future?
Well, it looks as if the company is doing very well and expanding.
Yes, it is.
A number of different countries. And do you have any ideas?
Well, I know somebody who is going to comment directly on that. I think perhaps I'm going to go on and speak to our next highly distinguished guest, our former Vice President of Research and Development, our current research ambassador, somebody who we would really never have gained the success that we have now were it not for him. And welcome, John Molson.
Thank you, Jimmy. And I just love listening to Patricia speak.
Can't you listen to her all day?
The trouble is I'm not used to speaking anymore because I'm living by myself.
You and all Canadians and 30% of Americans are locked up at home.
Patricia, I'm sure you could still step into a lab and hit it out of the park. I'm telling you. You're smart and energetic, and you still have the same look as you did the first time I met you 20 years ago.
You don't look much younger. I mean, much different. You look so young.
John is kind of like Dorian Gray. I'm the painting. I get older and he gets younger. Now, John, earlier on, I said that you were an incredible sponge for medical information, but you had no background in medicine. What were you doing before all this?
That's true, Jimmy. I didn't. I actually worked in the oil service business. I found myself in Aberdeen, Scotland. And to tell you a funny story, I packed for this trip in August in 80-degree weather in Montreal. I arrive in Aberdeen, Scotland. The north wind is blowing, and it was about 40 degrees. I had to go out and buy all new clothes because I only packed summer clothes. And then I went from there to St. John's, Newfoundland, which was even worse. But that was really interesting. And I went from there. I worked. Then I I spent time with Molson's, working all through the UK, all through the US and Canada, and that was great experience. That taught me everything about customer service because the beer business is about taking care of people. So that was great training for Immunotech. And, I had studied marketing, I had studied sales, and I didn't know very much about finance. So I ended up doing a stint at the Royal Bank in their corporate lending program. So that taught me about corporate finance, about financial analysis, and that was great experience.
Well, when you were first exposed to the MLM business, how did that happen? How did you end up hooking up with Chuck Roberts?
It's if you look at the history of this discovery, and you pointed out some serendipitous moments. In the early 90s, I was looking at a business opportunity, and it centered on acquiring the Canadian rights for an MLM product marketed by a company in California. And my business partner, who was a serial entrepreneur, was really interested in the MLM concept, but knew very little about the mechanics of the business. One of his good friends was Chuck, and we went and consulted with Chuck about this business. It turned out they tried to overcharge me. I guess I found out who I was, and so we didn't do it. But a couple years later, Chuck formed a company, and he was the first person. He came to me, and I was the first person to invest in the company, which was at that time Roberts Evergreen. So that's how I got involved in the MLM business.
How did you split up responsibilities?
Well, at that time, I was just learning the business. It really didn't happen until we formed Immunotech when we formed Immunotech, it's essentially we met Gus, met Dieter, and after the meeting, Chuck said to me, one of us is going to have to learn the science. And since he had no share, he had more shares than I did, and he basically appointed me, and little did I know, what was going to happen after that.
Good move. That's all I can say is good move. Now, of course, you were developing a really tight relationship with Dr. Boonel. So what were the early days like?
Well, I can tell you it was incredibly intimidating. The company opens for business, and I'm fielding all these scientific questions, medical questions. We're discussing scientific initiatives. So if we had PNT at the time, I probably would have been taking a bottle a day. But Gustavo, bless his heart, answered all my questions. He gave me all his papers to read. He gave me medical books, scientific books, and I slowly learned. And through people such as Gustavo, such as yourself, such as Patricia, all great resources, I was able to get all my questions answered. And I remembered basically everything I was told because I was so interested in it. I just had an affinity for it and picked up quickly. But the one thing I realized is the more I learned, the more I realized the less I knew. So it was a very humbling experience.
You see, both Patricia was humble and you're humble. So I just need to bring some things to the forefront. John, it sounds like he's just asking Patricia and Gus and myself questions, but in fact, John would interface with the highest powered research institutions and doctors across the world and was able to eloquently discuss this topic with them, and even more importantly, to a degree where they wanted to get involved. This was a remarkable feat, John. So you are a humble person, but damn, you're effective. Now, you were always really passionate about sports. You were an elite level athlete. You were a cycling champion. How did that fit into Immunotech's direction?
Yeah, so it's interesting, it's before we formed the company, Dieter gave me a canister of Immunocal to try. And that was at the tail end of my career. And I noticed a significant difference on how I felt. And actually that was a big reason for me, because when we formed the company, it was two companies that came together and we had to put up a lot of cash. And so that made the decision easy for me to put that cash injection into the company. And I also gave a sample to a friend of mine who was actually the world champion Olympic distance triathlete at the time. And he confirmed what I had said, and he related an interesting anecdote, and you've talked about this in the past, and I've talked about it. He went to a training camp, and all his partners got sick. He didn't get sick. He also had bad seasonal allergies, and it alleviated that. And he told me a funny story. He was in France for the World Championships, and somebody stole his Immunocal. He was so upset, he phoned me to try and get another can. Anyways, and I also had a friend who was on the Canadian men's rowing team, so I informally gave it to him. So we had 2 or 3 good examples, myself and these 2 elite athletes. So from that, we ended up running with a study with Dr. Lanz. As you pointed out, we saw this performance increment, and it's exactly what we were feeling played out in the data.
Yeah, and that, you see, that's a big difference between Immunotech and the vast majority of other companies. We are never going to hang our hats just on testimonials. We will take this positive feedback from the field and take it to the lab and do research on it, on human beings, and do it in a way where we would make a statement that is statistically valid. See, this is a huge difference. Now, John, Gus was highly involved for a while, and Dr. Droog was highly involved for a while, and then this whole project ended up entirely on your lap. How did you deal with that?
Well, I not only did Gus and Dr. Droog and yourself teach me about science, they taught me how to think about science and how to interpret science. And this, to me, when I talk about science at Immunotech, I talk about an R&D culture. And the great difference here is, many companies will run studies where they game the data and they misrepresent the data. And science is about integrity at the highest level. And so we always could defend every word we said in our press releases about our data. And, as you talked about, when I'm talking with people like Jerry Baptiste, when I'm talking with senior people at all these different research institutes, if I have to go back and feel like I've, misrepresented something and they find out, like, how can I sit there and face them? And so I could always walk into these meetings, with total confidence, because I was stating exactly how Dr. Droog interpreted the data, how Patricia interpreted the data, how you interpreted the data. And it is what it is. I never went 1 centimeter past what the data told us. And, you didn't have to, because this product worked. I mean, the reason we have all these studies is because the product works in multiple models. And so that was the greatest advantage we had. And I never had to misrepresent anything, and I never would.
Well, good science, really good science, is absolutely dependent on great integrity. And you maintained that for 20 years. In closing, John, where is this going?
Well, a couple things. First of all, the data that I'm really excited about, and again, this extends from Dr. Droog, Dr. Bunos, this holistic perspective on health. When we talk about an athlete, when we talk about a patient, you're talking about multidisciplinary approaches and multiple fields of expertise that go into a high-performance athlete in terms of maximizing their training. And the same thing with regard to potential benefits of Immunical. I mean, we started with immune function, we looked at pulmonary function, we looked at all these different models, and 10 years ago we started work in the brain, and we have some very exciting data that we generated at 2 institutions, one in Denver, one here in Montreal, and that led us to the study of MCI, which there's a huge multi-million dollar project being funded by the Canadian government on brain research. And
let me just expand on that, John. MCI, for the people who aren't on top of it's mild cognitive impairment, as opposed to full dementia like you see in Alzheimer's or in certain cases Parkinson's. MCI is when guys and women my age forget where our keys are, stumble to find words, can't remember the name of the person that they met last night. This is mild cognitive impairment, and John has initiated research at McGill on that. Sorry, John, go ahead.
Yeah, and just an important point is that the people that we have involved in this study are world-leading experts. The only reason we were able to do this study is because of an experimental study done by Hyman Schipper, who's a top neurologist here, where Immunical generated spectacular results. And that's what convinced these other people and convinced Dr. Schipper to start this human study. So it wasn't a case of going in and paying for this study. We had to earn our way in, and Immunical earned its way in. And so I'm very excited about this, potentially where it could go, because there's very few answers. And the data from this study will be shared across 14 institutions in Canada.
So I'm going to, again, leverage that. When you look at other products and other companies, sometimes they say they have research, but what they actually have is they go out and they will find a small laboratory and pay them a bunch of money to come up with positive results, and they'll wave that paper all over the place. We don't do that. We go to usually very prestigious institutions where the scientific method is rigorously stuck to. Our work is submitted to usually the best journals, peer-reviewed journals, so that we undergo a process of critical analysis and review by other people in the field that have nothing to do with our company or our product, so that the papers that we put out, they're tight. They're tight, they're honest, they're valid, and they have integrity. And again, this is John is unflappable when it comes to this degree of obsessive compulsive orientation to detail and accuracy. John, how do I thank you for a quarter of a century of work? I'll just say, well done, and you've been an inspiration.
Well, I have one final thought.
Yeah.
That to capture this 25 years of work and Patricia's work, I said, if you look at the events that led to the discovery of Immunical, the formation of Immunitech, the commercialization of the product, it happened because highly talented people worked together as a team towards a common goal. And this is a great lesson. Nobody has all the answers. Surround yourself with people who share values, passion, and vision as we did, and great things can happen.
Wow. Thank you, John. And thank you, Patricia. And John, thank you for the opportunity. I'll pass it back to you. John Solomon.
I just, once again, I think I speak for everyone on this call to thank Dr. Kongshavn for 40 plus years of work and integrity on what you did with your colleague and friend, Dr. Bunos. None of us would be here without you. Many of our family members have had lives that have been enhanced, including my own mother, because of this product. So I want to thank you on behalf of the field organization, the employees, the ownership, the management, et cetera, for just a great product that you were such a major part in developing, and we really appreciate it. So thank you again, Dr. Kongshavn. Dr. Gutman, you're the best. I can tell you, you're amazing, and love the history lesson. And John Molson, I value our friendship so greatly all these years. And you know, John's just such an amazing guy. Yesterday, I have a good friend that unfortunately is going through a TBI, which is a traumatic brain injury, very, very serious. And I was having lunch with her and her husband. And ironically, it was their 21st wedding anniversary and her husband's birthday. And I said, let me see if I can get my friend John Molson on the phone. Right. And I did. I called John and he was there and he spent 15 minutes educating her. And yesterday afternoon, she got on the product. So, you know, yes, we are here. We're all business people. Everybody on this call, we're here to make money. That's certainly, you know, why we get up in the morning to build a business. But let me tell you, that's not going to keep you going long term on this. What keeps you going long term is when you see the results that people get from the work that Dr. Kongshavn and Dr. Bunos initiated. So many other people, including obviously Dr. Gutman, John Molson, and others have contributed to, and Dr. Droga, who was mentioned earlier, and some of the other doctors that have worked on this through the years. So it's interesting. So I just want to, before I introduce our next speaker, and you're going to want to stick around because he's an amazing man and you're going to want to hear what he has to say. But let me kind of give you a couple of notes on this. First of all, you know, what appealed to me the end of 1996 when my own mother became one of the first users of this product here in the United States, which ultimately led me to getting involved in the business, was the fact that even then, this was all based on evidence-based science. It wasn't hyperbole. It wasn't, here's what happened to Aunt Tilly. It was evidence-based science. And it's the only way that Dr. Kongshavn and Dr. Bunos ever rolled, frankly. You know what I mean? It was like, hey, if they couldn't prove it, they weren't going to say it. And neither should we, frankly. And it was all evidence-based. And that appealed to me because, frankly, having been already at that time in my life in network marketing for 13 years, I was tired of going out and not being able to share a product that I could tell people really had science behind it. So, you know, if you're looking at this as a business, you really want to consider that fact that this is evidence-based science. Everything you heard today, black and white, you can prove it. I kid Dr. Gutman all the time because I'm a little taller than he is, that if we stacked all the research up, Dr. Gutman, it would probably exceed both of our heights. Would you agree with that?
My height anyways. You're a big guy.
Anyway.
Dr. Gutman, let's come back to your book. And, you know, glutathione.org is the place for them to go and get that book?
That's right. And you can also spell it the Spanish way and have access to the book in Spanish. And in the future, we will have a French edition as well.
And, you know, I think one of the things, you know, when everyone's listening to the history today, we're talking about the science. And that's really what your book is about. You know, I've teased you in the past, one of these days you're going to write an actual novel instead of this reference book, these reference books. But, you know, so often we're asked, what will Immunical do for such and such? And the real question is, what does raising glutathione do? And that's what your book is so beneficial for, Dr. Gutman.
Thank you, Keith.
Okay.